The modern man, when he's out with his family, spending time with them at a restaurant or something, typically falls into one of two categories. Either they're completely oblivious with their head down their phone, or they're so hyper aware and paranoid of potential threats that they can't just be present and in the moment, an effective protector for their family. So what if we could find a healthy balance between the two by taking some tips, some tricks, and some practices from professional protectors, executive protection and Secret Service, to figure out what they do to set their families up for success given everything that they've learned in their profession. So today we are here with Centurion Defense Solutions, specifically Jacob and Scott, who have a background in protecting VIPs. Their company does a lot of different stuff as far as armed security guards, event security, and I'll let them talk a little bit more about what they do, but these guys are professionals, and today they are going to teach us and you guys a little bit what to look for in terms of keeping your family safe when you're out and about. So Jacob and Scott, can you guys give us a little bit of an idea of what your background is in this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I spent 11 years in the Army as a military police officer, MP, deployed to Afghanistan in 13 and 14, where I commanded a unit that did PSD, which is personal security detail. That's basically the military's version of executive protection. We also did convoy security, air security, detainee operations, and a few other things. Once I got back, I became the commander for 4 years of the QRF, or Quick Reaction Force, for the Tennessee National Guard that covered all of Middle and West Tennessee. So if there was some sort of like natural disaster, civil disturbance, riots, they're like, hey, we got to call the National Guard. That was us. We'd gear up, go out, take care of that kind of stuff.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, so right out of college, I went to work for the FBI, and I did, excuse me, 9 years with them as not a gun carrier. And then 1998, I got on with the Secret Service. I did 20 years with the service. Started in the Denver field office before transferring to DC, where I was on the President's detail from 2004 to 2009. Had to do a couple more years in DC before they let me out, and I transferred to Nashville and did 9 more years here, and I retired after 20 years with Secret Service in 2018.
Wow, so you guys have like that different backgrounds coming together for Centurion Defense Solutions.
Yeah, so we kind of had like the military side of things, and then we had the, it's not civilian, but the law enforcement and federal law enforcement side of things. So I actually started Centurion back in 2016. We didn't do any sort of physical protective services. We just did a lot of training, and we would do a lot of stuff like we would help businesses develop their SOPs, their emergency action plans, their procedures for evacuation, that type of thing. And then Scott was finishing up his time with the Secret Service office in Nashville and was kind of doing some moonlighting stuff on the side with us. And when he got ready to retire, he came to us, me and my former partners as us, and was like, hey, I think I'm gonna start my own company. We're like, no, we don't want that. So selfishly, we roped him into joining us, and then less than a year later, he bought out my old partner, so it's been he and I, and we immediately, because of his background and mine, got into protective services and actually doing physical security and EP and that type of thing, and it's just blown up since then.
Okay, so obviously there's gonna be a lot to cover inside of everything that we're covering today, but what are those sections or segments that we're gonna try to dissect and take part by part as far as protecting our families when we're just away from the home?
Yeah, so EP in itself is just, it's a big abstract monster. There's a lot of pieces that go into that, and we could take up a lot of time talking about that. But what we want to do for you guys today is really kind of give you like the top 5 things, the bullet points. So what we're going to do first is talk about the advance, which is just our reconnaissance and our planning that we do before we ever leave the house with the family. After that is transportation. So how do we safely and efficiently get our family and ourselves from point A to point B? After that is what we call transition spaces. This is arguably the most dangerous area when you're doing any kind of EP, whether it's professionally or with your family. Moving your family through transition spaces, which are just unknown, uncontrolled spaces, such as like a city block, a parking lot, a parking garage, that type of thing. And then we're going to get them into the venue. What do we do to keep them safe in the venue? Venue security, whether it's you're going to see a movie at the theater, whether you're going to dinner at the restaurant, what are the things that we do while we're in there to keep the family safe? And then after that is we got to turn around and get them home again as quickly, as safely as possible from point A to point B again.
So when people hear the word advance, they probably assume, to me at least, that's movement, right? That's when people use that the most. So can you actually explain the chapter 1, the first step, advance? What does that look like and what does it entail?
For us, in like the executive protection style, advance means something different. It means it's all of your recon and all of your planning that you do in advance of your movement or in advance of the event or whatever may be going on. So reconnaissance and planning before we ever leave the house as fathers and as husbands.
So what would that look like on the paid personal security or Secret Service aspect, like how much work and prep work would go into the recon, let's say, before you're ever like executing or moving on that mission?
Well, we're in the Secret Service or executive protection realm. You're talking about days of advance, almost a week. Well, obviously, that's not what we're going to do as fathers or as husbands, not as intensive, but you can do some really quick legwork.
Yeah, it's kind of a watered down, it's probably a bad term, but more of a slimmed down version of what we would do. If we were doing an advance for a client, or when we do advances for our clients, it starts, like you said, days in advance. We'd be on the computer, we'd be looking at aerials, we'd be looking at routes, primary routes, secondary routes, maybe even tertiary routes. Of course, where's the venue is at, what's around it, what kind of a neighborhood is it in, what kind of neighborhoods or areas of town am I going to be driving to? Are they safe? Are they not safe? Historically, what are the crime rates in that area? And then, of course, at the venue, I'm doing an intensive site survey. Where are the doors? Where are the hard rooms? Where are the bathrooms? Talking to the manager, the staff. Does any of the staff look like they could pose an issue? It's a multi-day process that covers pages and pages of checklists and work that we go into.
What would you be doing as a dad?
As a dad, the first thing I'm going to do, let's be honest, like the wife wants to go out to dinner with you and the kids, right? So she's getting ready. I'm going to pull up my phone and look at where it is we're going. Now, one of the first tips I would have is if we can't physically, or it's not really realistic to physically go do a site survey before we go anywhere with the family, I completely understand that. I don't even do that. But what you can do is go someplace that you're familiar with, right? If we're honest, like 90% of the places we go is probably 5 or 6 places, right? We all go to the same restaurants, we all go to the same movie theaters, we all go to the same breweries, that type of thing like that. So these are areas that we should be familiar with. And if we're not, let's start getting familiar with them. So I've looked at the area I'm going, I know the restaurant or not. And if I don't know the restaurant, let's look at Google Street View. What does the entrance look like? What does the backside look like? Let's look at aerials, Google Maps, just real quick. I'm just sitting on my phone waiting, killing time. What does it look like? I'm not afraid to pull up my phone and map it out. Even if I know the town like the back of my hand, let's map it out and see if there's anything that pops up like construction or some sort of blockage and I've got to get a different route.
I was going to say, a lot of places you're going provide interior views on Google Maps as well. If you're go to the Wild Horse Saloon, they give you a 360-degree view of every floor of the saloon. So take advantage of that kind of stuff. And it takes, 1 or 2 minutes on your phone to be able to do that.
So one of the things that we do in our advanced planning is not only like a primary and secondary route, but are there safe havens along the way? So in between me, point A and point B where we're going, like, are there police departments along the route and where they're at? Are there fire departments along the route where they're at? Is there a hospital, emergency care centers? And that's stuff that's easy to find. But again, that's stuff that you should be familiar with when you're in town. If you're out of town or in someplace new, you might have to do a little more research. But if you're in town, you should know that kind of stuff. You should know how to get there. And then back to the GPS point, another reason that I like to have some sort of mapping app up is if there's an emergency, I may think I know where the hospital's at, but if I got someone that's bleeding out or something that's going catastrophically wrong, am I gonna pull out my phone and start Googling, the nearest hospital, especially if my hands are covered in blood or something like that, worst case scenario? No. These mapping apps, it's easy to just hit 1 or 2 buttons and it'll automatically redirect you to the nearest emergency room, level 1 trauma or whatever. So that's good to have. But it helps us know where the safe haven's at, but also we should be doing our recon and knowing, like you said, these are kind of the sketchy areas and the places to avoid. During the day, it may be different than during night. That's all just part of your planning process and getting to know your town and your area. If you're in a new town or a new area and you're going to, let's say, a new restaurant you've never been to before, whatever, it's probably not expedient for you to do an advance like we're talking about. So you may have to do an advance on site. It's kind of I don't know if the terms really line up because it's not really an advance, but you're doing your recon in real time. And sometimes that happens. That happens in missions in the field. Sometimes you have a change of mission, but that's the same thing as being a father and a husband. Like, you may have to do an advance and recon in real time, and we'll show you guys kind of what that looks like too when you actually get to the venue.
What up, dudes? There's a couple of companies that make content like this possible and free for you guys. One of those is Steel Industries. If you're looking to get into night vision, they are a great place to go. Incredible customer service, great prices. You can get 5% off all non-sale items on their site right now with a link in the description. And we're talking about getting out with your family and like protecting your family. Well, if you're ever driving around your family at night and you're actually trying to get out of like a horrible city that Josh used to live in, like Portland, then it's pretty awesome to just disconnect your daylight brights, throw on your nods, and drive at night. 100 Concepts, another sponsor of the channel. You can get 15% off everything that they sell on in the link in the description. They make all kinds of anti-reflective devices or hex caps for your scopes, your optics, your flashlights.
Also, if you guys are trying to do a better job at protecting your family, there are tools that can be helpful, like flashlights, range finders, even warm blankets that you might want to have on hand. And if you guys are curious about that kind of stuff, go check out Sportsman's Guide. Currently, they do have a sale that's going on. They have stuff on sale like Burris 1-6s. They have some Vortex optics, some Holosun optics. They have a handful of really good stuff that is on sale right now, so go check them out. So if you guys are curious about whether it's 100 Concepts, Steel Industries, or Sportsman's Guide, link is in the description. Let's get back to the video.
I can't help but laugh. I'm just thinking about how terrified my kids would be in pitch black driving 80 miles an hour down the road. Now that we're into transport, what's going on?
Well, the first thing before we ever leave the house with the family, we get in the car's started. I want to make sure that, of course, seems obvious, but it's not always that way. Is everybody strapped in? Is everyone's door locked? The windows up. It may be nice weather, and that's up to you if you decide, you know, if the kids want to have the windows down or whatever, but I like having the windows up just so that people can't, at stoplights or intersections, can't just reach in, grab on a window, pull, break it, the other, anything like that.
When you get a VIP into your vehicle, like, what are you doing as the navigator or as the driver? Are you just, is there anything special about it? Are you just following a map and just being observant?
Well, you're driving as the driver, right? Typically, the driver's driving and you have security riding right front seat, right? If it's a VIP. Yeah, so, because the driver can't do his job, can't provide security while he's driving, right? So, and you're driving much more defensively, right? You're aware of, while if you're in your personal car and you're out by yourself, maybe you're driving more aggressively, you're changing lanes more, driving closer to somebody in front of you. When you're driving a VIP, you're performing executive protection, you're driving a lot more defensively, right? You want to account for the other driver's bad driving. So you stay further away, right? You're going to give yourself time to stop, and time to stop without slamming on your brakes, right? You have time to gradually go on the brake. You're changing lanes less often because that creates, I think, more chance for an accident.
You have to do a lot more thinking ahead.
A lot more thinking. There's a lot more thinking involved in driving as a security driver than pretty much all of us when we get in the car to go somewhere, especially someplace we go to frequently. You don't think when you drive. Your body kind of goes into autopilot. You can't do that when you're a security driver.
Yeah, I noticed that I drive radically different whenever I'm by myself versus whenever I have my family in the car. My wife often reminds me, you have precious cargo.
Let's say Drew and I are taking a 2-hour drive with our families. We're going on vacation somewhere. Are you guys doing anything strategically with your vehicles, like trying to keep closer together or communicating, whether it's over radio or someone else texting, you know, your wife sending a text?
As a husband, as a wife, as a protector, if we're driving with multiple vehicles, yes. And that happens to us quite a bit. Like if we're going on vacation and we're taking not just our kids, but all their friends, things like that, we may have to drive down to Florida a lot. So we'll have communication, one, not just a cell phone. I like radios. So we have radios because it's instant, right? It's a lot easier to use. And then again, when you're driving in a convoy, if you're the lead vehicle, you just have to be cognizant of thinking ahead and reacting quicker and sooner to like change lights and things, because you got to think, well, I'm not just in a 12-foot long vehicle, I'm in a 200-foot long vehicle, because I've got to account for all those people. I don't want to lose them at red lights and get separated. I don't want to lose them at intersections. I don't want to cause them to speed up to try and catch up to me and then cause an accident because somebody pulls out in between us. So we try not to let people in between us if at all possible, of course legally and safely, not letting people in us while still maintaining a safe stopping distance, and then communicating. And then as the lead vehicle, which I usually am, just making sure that I'm not running up on a quick right-hand turn and all of a sudden throwing my blinker on and ducking over. Like I'm planning ahead and making sure that all of that is communicated down the line to all the vehicles and making it as safe as possible. Before I ever leave, I want to make sure I've got enough fuel in my vehicle so that I'm not stopping at a gas station if I don't have to with my family in the car, because again, that's another unknown space, transitional space if we have to leave and walk inside. And it just leaves us, you know, it leaves you and your family exposed and vulnerable. So if we can avoid that, let's do that. So always making sure you have enough fuel in the car to get from point A to point B and home. So I always tell my kids and my family that treat the quarter tank line as the empty line. Like, there's no reason you should be very far underneath the quarter tank line. Like, don't push it. They still do, but that's what we tell them, don't push it. So making sure you got enough fuel and not having to stop at some weird place.
That also goes to, let's say in the middle of the night you had an emergency, family emergency, and had to take somebody to the hospital. You don't want to roll out and hop in your car and you all get ready to go and whoops, we need to get gas. Well, it's 1 a.m. Is the gas station even open? So just be cognizant of keeping enough fuel in your car.
But there's going to be times where you're not going to have enough fuel and you got to stop and you got to fill up. So gas stations are one of those places. Back to the original conversation, like, do I know the gas stations along my route? Which ones are seedy? Which ones are well lit, clean, and don't have, as many homeless people hanging around? So that's part of the advance, and then part of transport is knowing those areas. And then once you get there, knowing how to actually navigate safely a gas station. Like, what pumps do I pull up to? Do I want to be on the outside? Do I want to be inside? I always prefer to pull up, to a pump that's, kind of towards the end on the outside, so that I feel like, at least, I'm not as likely to get caught up in traffic that's going just in and out of the service station, and I feel like I could get out or exfil more quickly. When I pull up to a gas station with the family, put the car in park, it's going to unlock the doors, but I shut it off. I get out, I make sure that I've already got like my method of payment in my hand. I know my code if I'm putting in my gas code, whatever it is. But as soon as I get out, I lock the doors behind me so the family's in the car nice and safe. One of the big crimes we see nowadays is while people are pumping the gas and they're oblivious, people sneak around the outside because they left the door open. They open the door and they snag somebody's purse or somebody's phone or whatever it is, valuables from inside. You don't want that happening when your family's inside, especially if you got small children. That could be traumatic. Kids have gotten kidnapped that way. So.
Or even with these automatic keys where you just push a button and the car starts right up, someone can hop in, push a button and take your whole car.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that happen, on TV and in the news.
While you're waiting for that gas, let's say you got 4 minutes while that gas is going into the car. Are you getting back in the car? Are you hanging out outside and walking around your vehicle? Is there anything that you're doing?
I like to go to the back. That way I can look kind of forward. I can see the vehicle. I can see my family inside, but I'm minimizing the dead space, the spaces I can't see past my vehicle and past the pump. And I'm also giving myself standoff distance. So if something pops out of nowhere, I've got time and space to deal with that. And when you're in an emergency too, especially with modern vehicles like start stop buttons, it seems like, oh man, it starts up so fast. You're in an emergency, it feels like forever because you're like, come on. It seems short, but if you're in an emergency and you're trying to get away because there's a guy trying to shoot your family or something, that's going to take forever. Yeah. It's going to feel like forever.
So let's say you guys are on a family road trip again, and the kids really want, I don't know, water or snacks, or got to go to the bathroom. Are there any other considerations? Like, are you going in before the kids go in and then coming back and getting them? Is anything like that?
I think a lot of that's age driven, right? I've got, my youngest is 16. I have 16, 18, and 21. So obviously how I treat them as they get older, is different. And also, I get accused by my daughters of being sexist. Well, yes, I am, honestly, right? So even though I have a 16 and 18-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old son, when we're in a public space, I was just talking to my wife the other day, who went shopping, coming up for the prom with my daughter. They were going to a restroom in the mall. My wife doesn't let her go in there by herself. We've had enough instances lately of, not to go down the whole road, of people who maybe aren't really a woman but think they're a woman and following people into a bathroom. I don't let my daughter go places alone that I'd let my son.
You're also going to make that decision as soon as you pull up to the gas station.
It's an observation.
That situational awareness, that spidey sense, and that taking a look around. How clean is it? How dirty is it? What kind of people are frequenting that area? I could pull up to 90% of places, look at it and being like, all right, if you just have to go inside, you're going to wait till I'm done pumping the gas and then I'm going inside with you and we're all going together.
People that want to do you harm, they're paying attention to whether or not you're paying attention, right? And just by being observant and noticeably observant, you may be deterring an attack that you never knew was going to take place, right? You're making yourself, it sounds bad, but you want to make yourself a less of a target, and so they'll move on to somebody else. And just be observant.
It's like the old adage, I don't have to be faster than the bear, I just have to be faster than you. It's the same. That's what security is all about. I don't have to be the most secure. I got to be more secure than these other people. That way the bad, because it's a jungle. the bad guys, they've done plenty of studies of guys in prison for violent crime, and they've straight up said, I'm looking for the weakest looking link. And so if you don't look like the weakest link, there's a very good chance they're going to move on to something that is, because they don't want to spend more energy and resources than they have to. So like Scott said, you know, making yourself look like a harder target goes a long way, and that goes with your driving and your driving style. One of the things that we always do driving clients, driving with family, is if you come up to a red light or you're in traffic, you know, our tendency is to want to just like crowd, like, I don't want to leave space because guy might cut in, or if they go, you know, I might be behind. So I always leave space. I always leave at least a half a car length in between me and the vehicle in front of me. That way, if something goes south and I have to get out of there, I'm not stuck. I can take a left, I can take a right, I can get out if I need to. So it sounds easy, and I'm guilty of it too, but we just get so tied up and just drive, especially in traffic around here, that we just like pull right up on people's bumpers. You don't want to do that. You want to leave space so that if I have to get out quickly, I can. Again, lane choice is something you want to think about as well. If you have multiple lanes, which one's the best one to be in defensively?
Is it typically the middle lane so you can go either way?
Typically, it really depends on the road layout. And see, like now that lane, we lost it. It turned into a turn lane. So now I'm in the right-hand lane. That's fine. If there's two lanes, obviously it's going to be fairly, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But like, is there a concrete median, or is there just stripes that I could drive over if I needed to? So taking that, you know, the curbs on the side of the road, especially if we're in a neighborhood, are they large concrete curbs, or is it just grass where if I really need to, especially in a 4-wheel drive, I could just haul off through that field and I'm creating space, distance and time between me and any sort of threat. So those are all there's 1,000 different considerations to take into. But
either one of you, have you ever had to like use your vehicle to, you know, take someone, or to remove another vehicular threat?
I mean, in Afghanistan, yes. In the civilian world, no.
Never a threat, but like when you're driving, like if you're driving what we call follow-up, the security vehicle, right? And it's not a presidential motorcade where you own the whole street and you're in traffic. Your job is to block and defend the limo, which is carrying the protectee in front of you. So
there's things you can do with a vehicle that are going to not necessarily stop, but severely deter people from doing what you think they're going to do. Like creeping over to I mean, that's a whole class in itself with defensive driving, is like, you know, just position your vehicle in a way that's going to deter people from cutting in front of you or in traffic or trying to merge on top of you.
You're paying attention, you're going to notice what's this other car behind it. I mean, just really owning the other lane so you can't pull up next to them and just driving very aggressively.
Yeah, I guess I've noticed it myself. You know, you watch someone else driving down the freeway and the guy who's kind of hogging the line or moving a little bit faster, you tend to just subconsciously give him space.
Yeah, and you were paying attention to other people's vehicular body posture, and that's why you knew that. You didn't even think it. You just, like, by the way that guy was driving, you knew, okay, he's in a hurry and he's going to come up here in this merge lane and he's going to pass me. I'm going to give him the space to do that because it's not worth my wrecking my car and injuring my family just to deal with this guy. And I think that's something that a lot of guys, protectors, will deal with too, is when you're driving, don't let your ego get in the way. Especially when you got your family in the car and you're trying to protect them. Like, there's so much road rage in this day and age. People are just already here, and then driving in traffic puts them here and they're ready to just, you know, go off on people. I see it every day. It's just, it seems like there's road rage in these big cities all the time. So what can you do defensive driving wise to avoid that? Like, if you know that guy's in a hurry and he's driving like a you-know-what, give him space, let him go do his thing, run up the road. It doesn't cost you anything except maybe a few seconds of your time to back off, let them merge.
So let's say that you get off the freeway, you know, stop at that red light, and there's some guy who's going door to door with a cardboard sign and he's asking for money. And he's looking a little bit shady, maybe he's not totally in the right headspace, and you also have your family in your car. Is there anything specific that you guys do subconsciously? Does this ring any bells with things that you guys might do right off the bat?
For myself, and I pull up to an intersection and I see that a lot of people are first instinct is make eye contact or not make eye contact, right? Like, oh, if I don't look at them, they're not going to come up here and ask for money. I do the opposite. I make direct eye contact, make it as uncomfortable as possible, and I'll shake my head no, like, can't help you. Like, don't even come over here. And 99% of the time, That's all they need. And I'm not trying to be a jerk and saying those people don't need help or shouldn't give something, but my family's safety comes first.
That's good to know. I always just avoid eye contact, but now I'm going to practice staring.
Stare right at him.
Yeah, man.
But you can't just stare, because then they're like, oh, he's interested and we've made a connection, so I'm going to approach. You got to give them like the parse lips and the head shake, like,
Let them know that you see them, right? It's like I'm not oblivious, right? I see, and you make eye contact, like, okay, they're watching. It goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago about, about just being observant.
Something else I always recommend that goes back to the equipment side of things, which we're not talking a lot about today. We'll talk a little bit, but because it certainly helps. Today's more about the things you can do mentally and physically to prepare and make yourself safer. But one of the things I always do is all my vehicles have dark tinted windows. So I'm just limiting how much information the outside world can get by looking at my vehicle and inside. I'm just limiting the amount of information. So I like dark tinted windows as just as an easy, mechanical thing I can do that feels like it gives me a slight advantage.
Yeah, the other big thing I see all the time, drives me crazy, are people with like gun company stickers on their windows. It's like, dude, you just made your vehicle a hot target for anybody once you park your car and you leave it. Like,
or the stick figure family. You just told everyone that you've got 3 5-year-old little girls in your car. There's a lot of sexual predators out there that would love to see that, and now they're going to follow you to your next stop. Let's quit giving information away to the bad guys. Let's hold everything as close to the vest as we can, make ourselves as innocuous and unassuming looking as we can, and just give ourselves every little bit of advantage. When I get to the parking lot, you got to think about where I'm going to park. Obviously, well-lit areas. I want to park as close to the door as I can, so that we have less time spent in that transitional space or in that parking lot. Another consideration is, do I drop the family off and let them go inside by themselves while I go park? Or do I park and then walk the family inside myself? There's a lot of different factors there that you got to consider to make that call. For me, if it's a very short distance, to drop them off, like maybe 20, 30 feet, and I can sit there and watch them get out of the car, walk inside, and then I can go park myself and navigate that transitional space myself, I'll do that. I feel better with them being in a nice, secure restaurant or movie theater, wherever it may be, than I do walking them through, some random parking lot, parking garage. But that may be different for other people. You may feel better parking and all walking in together. And I think some of that's age dependent, as you talked about.
And that could be driven too. Is it daylight or is it dark outside?
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of area are you in? Are there actually lit parking spots, or are you in one of those parking areas where it's just dark everywhere? Well, if that's the case, then I know I'm going to drop them off and I'll navigate the transitional space, the parking lot myself. My situation's a lot different because I got 2 boys and they're 17 and 13. They're both over 6 foot tall. So my wife has her own EP detail. So I feel better like dropping her off with my 2 boys, or even just one of them, and they'll walk her inside and get her inside while dad goes and parks the car and takes it out. And then vice versa. When it's time to leave, I almost never walk my family out to the parking lot to go get in the car and leave together. They finish up the bill, finish up talking, conversation. I go get the car and I text as I'm pulling up. They leave the table and they come outside, and I'm as close to the front door or whatever exit door they're using as possible, and they hop right in.
Picture any mall during Christmas time. Every parking spot is taken and you are driving around, honestly taking whatever parking spot that you can get. What are you guys looking for other than a place to land the vehicle?
No, that's a good one, and that's going to be dependent on what area you're in or whatever you're going to. Obviously, lighting's a big one.
It's also driven by, as Jacob's saying, if it's you may determine at the moment I've dropped them off in parking. Yeah, well, I'm going to go get the car too because I had to park so far away, or I know what this space is going to look like when we're coming back to the car. And the decision's made then that I'm also going to go out to the car by myself, as Jacob said, and come pick them up by the entrance as well.
There's a good sign. Hide, lock, and take. Always do that stuff. A lot of parking lots these days will be directional. So like this lane is only this way, and then this parking area is only this way. So when you're looking for a parking spot, especially in a large parking lot with a lot of traffic, I like to find a spot that is not at the long end of like a one direction parking lot area. So like if we can only go north in this section of the parking lot, I don't want to park on the far south end, because that means when I leave, I've got to drive all the way north, turn around and come all the way back south to get out of there, and I can't get out of there quickly and efficiently. So I'm going to find something that's near the end of the direction of travel for that parking area, if it's if it is directional and if I have that choice.
So which do you prioritize, being able to quickly exit the parking lot or being as close to the front door as possible, if you had to choose?
That's a good question, and it's MET TC, situational dependent. That's the easy answer, because there is a lot of things to take in there, especially kind of like how seedy the area looks, or how nice it is, or what kind of crime's in that area.
My initial response to that would be closer to the door.
Yeah.
Because it's transition spaces. You want to shorten that as much as possible.
The car is a part of your safety location.
Yeah, it's a known, right? It's a safe haven.
So we've been talking a lot about transition spaces. We've done our advance. We've completed the transport. We're pulling into a parking space in a parking lot, and we can pretend like it's totally filled. What are you doing in a transition space to minimize risk and threat and get from point A to point B safely? What are you guys thinking about and doing?
Again, if I can drop my family off a very short distance at the front door, I prefer to do that so they don't have to navigate the transitional space. I can do it alone, so I would do that. If that's not possible, I'm going to find a parking spot as close to the front door. Again, getting us as close and spending the least amount of time in that space as possible. Back in or pull into a parking spot where you're facing out, so that if you have to exfil or leave quickly, you can do that. You're not bothered with trying to back up and use your cameras and possibly hitting someone. You can get out as quickly as possible. And then before I ever get out of the car, before I unlock the doors or do anything, I take a second to basically do my look and listen. I can't hear too much when I'm in a vehicle, but I can definitely look and check out my surroundings. Is it well lit? What kind of people are hanging out? What kind of vehicles are in the parking lot? I'm checking my blind spots. So I'm checking, if a vehicle like this, I can easily check 360 or see what's behind me. Obviously not all vehicles have that. I'm checking my mirrors, checking my rear view mirror. I'm just kind of looking around before I ever get out of the car, before I let my kids, because my kids have been taught this as well. You don't open the door and get out of the car until dad gets out of the car. So I've looked at that and make sure there's no one hiding in all the kind of the dead space before I stop the vehicle, get out, and then we'll talk about actually moving and walking through that transitional space.
I guess you're also not pulling up beside like side door vans.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Like, and I taught my wife to do this as well, especially when she's alone. Too often we're just like, well, let's just get into the parking spot as quickly as possible and go in and take care of our business. Well, don't pull up next to some creepy looking, or park next to some creepy looking van with a slide open door, or any van, or when you pull up, if there is a vehicle, you do have vehicles directly next to you, or even if not, are there people sitting in those vehicles? And are they there? Is it innocuous? Are they just looking on their phone and they're waiting for their business lunch to start, and so they're killing time? Or are they there looking around, like scanning the area like we are, because that could be a sign that they're looking for a target to do something bad. We've done everything we can with the transportation and the parking to minimize our space and our time in that transitional space. Again, the transitional space is any like unknown, uncontrolled public space, like parking lot, parking garage, a city block that you're having to walk down, a street, roadway, anything like that. Statistically, that's where most attacks occur. So that statistically, that's where we want to put most of our focus and deal with. So a very dangerous area. Professionally, when we're doing this with protectees, we would typically have a two-man team, and so we'd have a simple file. So we'd have a tail, which would usually be our detail leader, or excuse me, a lead, which would be our detail leader. We would have the protectee or protectees in the middle, and then at the very rear in the back, we have our tail. So, but that's something that you could easily do with your family, right? Especially if you're married, husband and wife, whatever, you got kids. I like to be up front when I get out of the car. I'm the lead. That way I have situational awareness to the front, basically everywhere from 9 to 12 to 3 o'clock. And then my wife is in the rear as the tail. She's looking at everything that's kind of behind us every now and then everything out to the left and the right, and then the kids are in the middle. So what we would do is, if we would get out, again, the kids don't get out of the car until dad gets out of the car. I get out, we kind of usually gather on this side because I'm usually the one driving. The wife would get out and come around. So if I'm the dad, you're my wife, thank you. It would look kind of like this, like I would get out and start leading. You as the kids would follow in line. I've got situational awareness, of course, of everything that's in front of us, everywhere to my left, to my right. The wife in the back's kind of paying attention every now and then to what's going on in the rear, slightly offset so she can see some things. The kids are just doing their thing, chilling in the middle. And I'm walking directly, the path of least resistance, walking directly to the entrance to this venue and getting there as quickly as I can. Some of the things that you want to look out for is if I'm going around a vehicle, I don't want to go such as this. I don't want to go immediately just around the vehicle because there's all that dead space or that space I can't see and I have no standoff. So if I have to navigate around the vehicle with you guys in tow, I'm creating space so that I can see around this vehicle before I'm going around the vehicle. And if there is something there, I've got space that I can deal with it. I can shove someone away if they jump out, and the kids can, and the wife can flee back to the car or into the venue, whatever they need to do. So something to think about. You don't want to be right up against anything that creates dead space because it doesn't give you any standoff distance or any time to deal with it.
Yeah, let's say you're going to the door and there's a panhandler, a homeless person, whatever there. You want to, whether it's mom or dad, who place yourself in between the unknown and whom you're protecting. So it's just a matter of just literally walking in between that unknown individual and your family.
What does it look like if it's a crowd?
You're going to tighten that up, right? Kind of similar to what we were talking about as you're driving. You want to prevent people from getting in between you and say, if, to follow up in the limo, well, you want to shorten the distance between mom and dad, and so you're closer to your children to prevent people from getting into that formation. You can protect them. The further you are away from them, if you're closer to my child than I am, I can't stop you, from doing harm. So you want to tighten up that formation, just move closer together. And that kind of will happen, to me, it always just kind of happens naturally. We don't want to get separated. We don't want to get lost. Again, going back to your point about the age of your children, and kind of is going to drive a lot of this. The smaller, the younger they are, the closer they're going to be. You may have to, physically take them by the hand. Yeah. So you want to shorten that distance when you're in a crowd, for sure.
I think a lot of people tend to shy away from, or they're so distracted, they forget about their natural protective tendencies. Like all moms and dads, I think by nature, when you remove the distractions, are very protective of their kids. Like we'll be in Target, and I'm not like hyper paranoid about everything that's going on around me, but we'll be in Target, and I'll just notice, like, naturally, if there's someone, like, man or woman, doesn't matter who it is, if they're like looking at a clothes section next to us, like I just kind of like stand in between, and it just like happens naturally. But I see a lot of families out and about, and their kids are just like running wild, and I understand that. But I feel like a lot of this comes back to like getting your family and your kids and your wife in the same kind of mindset, so that you don't always have to be super turned on. It's just happening naturally.
It really all happens naturally. And going back talking about crowds or being inside, what also can work is mom takes control of the kids, and you're like, follow me, right? Because you're at a point, you're up, you're aware, and she's making sure they stay close. If you have to get somewhere in a hurry, she's got charge of them. You can trust her that she's done that, and she knows to follow you to get out of wherever you are.
Yeah, and the more you do it as the husband, wife, your spouse is going to pick up on it. And we'll, share some resources, obviously, with you guys at the end that kind of helps learn this stuff. But it becomes natural, and all of a sudden you've got teammates. Yeah. And it's a force multiplier. And whether it's your, grown sons, older sons, or it's your wife, your husband, whatever, all of a sudden it makes it a lot easier, and you guys are doing it without even thinking about it, and you're that much safer.
Yeah, and it's much less formal than this all sounds about us walking. It's just gonna, you just do it. And does it look pretty? No. Does it look like a formation? No. But you're aware.
Now, for me personally, when I get to the door, first thing I'm gonna do is kind of look inside. If it's a glass door, see what I can see, turn around, see if anybody was following us or anything behind us. I open the door. Again, it's just polite as well, and I just go ahead and I usher my family inside. I prefer to have them go inside in front of me. If anything nefarious were happening inside of the restaurant, we probably would have known that by now. We're assuming, and it's probably a safe assumption, that it's safe in there. It's safer out there than it is in the transitional space. So I let them go in. I position myself behind them so that I'm in between them in any possible, scenarios or something that might happen in the transition space where we just came from. So we get to the venue. In this case, it's a restaurant, which I think is probably a really good example, because when you go out with your family, where do you go 80% of the time? You go eat, right? Yeah, so you might be going to the movie or something like that, but we go get food. So this is a huge one that I think applies to everybody. When I walk into the restaurant especially, like one of the first things I look at is table selection. Some places you go in and they're like, hey, you know, sit wherever you want. That doesn't always happen. You know, you put your name in, it's time for you to get seated. She walks you to a table. If it's up front, if it's within, you know, 20 feet or so, just depends on how I feel at the front door, I usually ask for a different table. Like, I don't want to be right up against the front door where there's no standoff, there's no space and time to react to something bad that comes through the front door. So I'm always asking, like, hey, can I get a table further back? Like, that one over in the corner looks great. You know, do you mind if we do that? Like that. A lot of times they're accommodating, not always. You're gonna get what you get, but I try that, because the further back I am in the restaurant, it gives me more space and time to react to any sort of threat. The other thing that's gonna affect the table selection too, which we'll talk about here in a minute, is the layout of the space. So we talked about our advance. Have we been here before? Are we familiar with it? Where are the bathrooms? Where are the other exits? Where's the kitchen? Because the kitchen's probably going to have a back door for deliveries. It may have a freezer that I could use to lock down as a hard room, those kinds of things. So that's going to affect table decision. But typically I want to be a little bit further back. So we've gotten a pretty good table. You know, it's further back. It gives me space and time to react to anything that may happen up front. The other thing is it gives us a really good view of the rest of the crowd, so I can see what's going on, who's doing what, is anyone acting weird. I can observe. And then it's an old adage or a cliche, but it's true, is like, dad wants to face the front door, right? And that's true. You want to face the front door. Typically that's where any sort of bad guy would come from, through the front door and start acting up. So I want to face the front door if at all possible. Sometimes you can't always see the door. A restaurant that my wife and I were at last night, because of the way it winds, I couldn't see the front door. The seat I chose faced out towards the main crowd so that I could watch the crowd. Because if I can't see the front door, at least I can see their reaction to what comes through the front door. So for me personally, that was my decision. But something like this is perfect. You see this a lot more in the restaurants, like a wide open concept. If I can get a table like this where I can see the crowd, the majority of the crowd, and I can see the front door, it's perfect. Plus it's back further, giving me time and space to react.
This is a reoccurring theme in starting to do this stuff yourself, especially for young guys. Young guys just start a family. They may not have considered any of this stuff. They may be watching this video. A lot of us do this naturally, pick the chair that faces the door, but like training your kids and talking through what you're doing, or your process, or why you're making an extra loop around the parking lot, or hey, I picked this spot because of XYZ. Just like mentioning that as you're doing stuff starts to like plant the seed into their head. You're inceptioning your own family.
Yeah, you're building teammates, and at the same time you're teaching them, whether it's young men or young women, you're teaching them to look out for their safety and to be protectors. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not raising victims, I'm raising protectors. So just these little things that we do on family outings becomes habit, and they do it themselves, because I know they're out doing it themselves when they go out with their friends and stuff. Yeah, so building that up.
And I think it makes your kids less afraid by having knowledge rather than withholding knowledge from them, right? Tell them this is why I do it. Dad's here to protect you. You don't have to be afraid of it. You don't like overblow it. You just let them know that there's good reasons why we do things like this.
Yeah, it's not scary. It's not a scary thing whatsoever. You're teaching them in a way that brings them up through it slowly, and especially if you have younger kids, and you're just helping them understand the why. And if you start with like kids your age, there's never going to be a why. It's just going to be, this is the way we do things.
These little things, like going back and forth between not letting your kid be a victim and not making them paranoid and scared of everything around you. It's like that perfect blend, which is what this is that we're talking about.
You take precautions, right? You don't walk out in the traffic, you look both ways.
Exactly, yeah. So, okay, we're sitting down.
Yeah.
What do you do now?
So once I get seated and I've looked around and I have a good lay of the land in our immediate vicinity, and I feel like, okay, things are safe, because the majority of the time they are, right?
And you're looking at the environment, but also the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just the layout of the floors and the chairs, the tables, but I'm looking at the people. Do people look out of place? Are people acting the way people in this environment should be acting, or are they acting differently? Is there a guy sitting by himself over there drinking a bunch of beer, staring at all the little girls? Just stuff like that. I mean, it happens. You can find that kind of stuff.
99.9% of the time, you're not the target. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Is it the guy that, Jacob referenced over there? Is it the man and woman that are about to have a domestic, you see them getting animated over the table near you? It's just again, goes back to being aware of your surroundings and just taking survey of all that. And it takes seconds, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to being on your phone while you're walking to the table, once you sit down at the table.
As soon as you sit down, right? Yeah.
We feel pretty secure that the family's secure right now. And I'm like, I usually tell my family, and they know now, but I'm like, hey, you know, daddy's got to use the restroom. That's when I get up and I do my reconnaissance in real time. And so we'll do that. We'll get up. Let's go look around. Let's get the lay of the land for the space that we're in. The things we're looking for is, you know, where's the front door, obviously? Where are any other exterior doors? Where's the kitchen if they're at a restaurant? Where are the emergency exit? Are there any ulterior exits that we could use, such as open windows if we can't get out a door? Where are the hard rooms? Bathrooms usually make good hard rooms. Places like this that serve food are going to have a freezer. The freezer makes a good hard room. I can lock that down. It's not going to be comfortable, but if I need to get in there and lock my family down there, I can. So one of the first things I notice in this space is what I would call like an alternative exit. Normally, like you can see here, we've got these roll-up garage doors. They're normally down, depends on the weather. This one's up. But like if the front door was blocked and I couldn't get out, and when I was trying to exfil and I couldn't get around this large bar space, which is a choke point and a funnel, then I would be like, hey, I can open those garage doors and I can get my family out there if I need to. So let's go take a look. How do they function? Do you know how to open this garage? What's a garage door? Everybody knows how to open it, right? So again, this is like clunky because we're walking you guys through this, but I would have got up from the table. I would have walked this direction, nonchalant, just having a good time, probably took my beer, my drink with me, and I just would have been like, all right, alternative exit, noted that I have to slide that out. It's not locked. Boom, throw it up. I could go out that way. I mean, it took 2 seconds to figure that out. So that's the kind of stuff. Again, as I said earlier, like we have basically what's a big funnel or a choke point. Like I can't get my family to where I know the back door is because I've been here before, but we'll go look at that. I can't get over that wall and get them through there very easily to get out of the space. I might have to come this way. Well, I can't come across. I could sneak behind the back of the bar maybe, but I'm just taking note that if everybody's trying to leave, we're gonna get funneled into a big herd into this area. All right, so that's something to think about too. Maybe I want to go a different direction of everybody else.
The other thing to take note of too is there any emergency medical equipment that the venue has on site? A lot of restaurants, a lot of concert halls and movie theaters have an AED on the wall, or maybe a stop the bleed kit, even some of them. So take note of that as well. Things you might need. What you're much more likely to need something like that than you are to go to respond to an active shooter. I mean, let's face it, it's probably going to be a medical emergency more so than something nefarious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've kind of walked around, found an alternative exit. I'm back at the front door, which I already knew about, and I'm just kind of looking at it again. Is there any traffic outside, anything crazy? Walking around again, just totally chill, nonchalant. Just looks like dad walking around, you know, headed towards the bathroom. And I'm just getting the lay of the land as we go, you know. Where are the hallways? How tight are the hallways? You know, are there closets, broom closets, whatever that may be useful or that somebody could hide in? Seating areas like this with more people, more traffic, you know, what are they doing? Do they look normal, like they're all hanging out? Is the status quo being upheld, or does something look off?
Is someone getting drunk and rowdy?
Yeah, right, exactly. And like he said, they look like potential trouble coming further down the road. You know, we got areas like this, employees only. You know, that could be used as a hard room. I don't want to invade their space and go look at their stuff, but I took a quick glance in. There's no exterior windows. So could I lock down in there? Possibly. It's obviously not bulletproof because it's going to be drywall. We assume it's drywall 2x4 construction. But if I can be out of sight, out of mind, that might be a good space to go. It's a large space, so there's a lot to deal with. Again, another alternative exit, big bay doors at the back. It's a long way to go if somebody's shooting the place up for me to get my family across here, but hey, we could get out of there. Again, where are the bathrooms? Not just for convenience, but typically bathrooms are tiled, don't have exterior windows or windows going into the space that you're in. So whether we're doing this with, you know, VIPs, people that we work for, or whether it's with our families, I like to take note of the bathrooms because they can typically be used as a hard room. We can get in there, we can shelter in place. They typically, you know, 99% of the time, we're gonna have one entrance in and out. I can cover that entrance. I can put my family in the corner, in a stall, hidden, and I only have to focus on that one door. And if anybody comes through there, I'm dealing with that threat. So every space is gonna be different. So I just get up from the table, I take that walk, check out all these different spaces and just kind of make a mental map. And then actually I'll sit down and make a mental plan too. You know, we talked about visualization, like I can sit down and still be present with my family, but when I've got a second, think about, okay, if somebody came through that front door, what am I doing? Where am I going? And just think about that just for a split second so that you don't have to think about it when it actually happens.
Exactly, and I would assume it's a lot like driving. When you first get your driver's license, or the first time driving, you're thinking about the four-way intersection, you're thinking about your blinker, you're thinking about, you know, if you are driving a stick, clutch, gas, brake, all that stuff. But as soon as it becomes second nature, you can then have a conversation with someone else in the car, and you're not having to stress so much. So I would assume it can be a lot of work and a little bit daunting to try and be like, driving, transitional spaces, where did I park the car? How far is that walk? Is it dark outside? But as soon as that starts to become practice and built in, you can, I don't want to say calm down, but it's way less work, I would assume.
Yeah, you put it on cruise control. You build up those physical habits, those neural pathways on thinking about that stuff and the way you do it, and before you know it, and I say cruise control in a good way, not like, oh, I'm just not paying attention to it. Like your body just does it, your brain just does it, your wife just does it, your kids just do it. It very much so. It becomes second nature.
And see, it's yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be clunky at first.
What about like, so kitchens?
Yeah.
I've always grown up thinking like kitchens are totally off limits.
So nothing's off limits when you're trying to save your family. And I like kitchens for one thing. Typically, kitchens have a back door because they have to have deliveries. Now, it may not be directly in the kitchen, it may be adjacent in the hallway, but it's gonna be somewhere close. Again, freezers inside kitchens are great spaces. They don't have windows and they have one door typically. So if I need to hunker down in there for a little while and make a safe space for my family, that's a good spot. Again, as Scott talked about, it's not always something nefarious like an active shooter. It could be a medical emergency. What if there's some sort of contamination inside of there? Kitchens have what? Sinks with water. Well, that's my decon site. If all of a sudden something goes off in this restaurant and we're all choking and gagging and our eyes are watering and I have mucus coming out of my nose and my wife's puking and I'm like, we got a decon. If I know where the kitchen is and where that big industrial sink is and where the water's at, I'm just dragging them over there, turning the water on, and we're dunking heads, and that's our decontamination spot. So you got to think about stuff outside of bombings, shootings, stabbings, things like that.
Even like a fire.
That's a fire. Yeah,
like people trying to funnel through a doorway in the middle of a fire, especially in like a Mexican restaurant where there's always 20,000 people in there. It's like having another door makes a big difference.
Yeah, and again, you may not want to do what you know everybody else is going to do. Everybody's going to run towards the front door, right? Because that's the only entrance that they know about, because they didn't do any sort of recon and they know. So they're just going to go boom right to the door that they know. Well, I probably don't want to take my family. If it's crowded, I'm not taking my family into that crowd. I'm going to go out one of my alternative exits that I found during my recon. The vast majority of the time, what I like to do, because we've been in this space and we know this space and it's secure because we've been here, it's a known entity. I'll let them settle up the bill, finish up their meals, their drinks, do whatever. I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna deal with that transitional space by myself. I'm gonna get in the car and I'm gonna pull it up front as close as I can, and then I'm gonna get them into the car. That's the easiest way to do it. You can't always do it that way. Whatever factors, you may have to all leave at the same time. That's perfectly fine. There's ways to deal with that. It's basically everything we did just now in reverse. So the premise is we're leaving a known secure space to go into a transitional space, to go into another known secure space or vehicle, and then to transport back home B to A, like the reverse of what we did earlier. Something to think about. Again, it's not always about nefarious. Trips and fall hazards. Like especially if you're in a dark restaurant and I'm walking around, if I see something my kid who's sometime oblivious might trip on, point it out. You know, we want to keep the kids safe from that stuff too, not just shootings and those sort of things. So I was looking for, so we get to the front door, we're now leaving a known secure space and we're gonna go out into the transitional space. We're gonna stay in the same formation. We're gonna head straight to the car and we're gonna get in the car just as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So as we leave, and because I'm up front as the lead, again, just situational awareness. My job is, navigation and pace, just making sure my family gets there going the right way. I've remembered where I parked in the parking lot, right? So I'm not like, oh yeah, am I parked on this row? Am I aisle M or N? I can't figure that. Like I know where my car's at. Yeah. And we laugh at that, but that's part of being a protector. Like where your stuff's at, right? So paying attention to where you parked, especially in large parking lots. So getting the family to the car as quickly as possible, just paying attention to my surroundings, navigating obstacles, not getting right up on objects like cars that create dead space. Is there anybody in between there? Is there anybody between here?
There's practical reasons for that too, right? If I'm walking right next to that car and the car starts to back out, they can't see me. The further you are away from it, drivers can see you transitioning, especially if it's dark, trying to get to your vehicle.
Yeah. Yep.
So one thing that we see all the time, like back when we were doing self-defense classes, especially for like women, is, you know, people walk out to their vehicle unprepared. So again, they forgot where they parked, so they're wandering around, spending more time in that space going, where did I park? And then they're looking like a lost sheep, and all of a sudden they got a target on their head for somebody that's sitting in their car watching this nefarious. Also, always have your keys with you. Of course, modern vehicles, if they're just in your pocket and you touch the door, a lot of times they're going to open. But if you don't have that, if you have to have a physical key to get in the car or push a button to unlock it, have those in your hand. Don't have them in your satchel, don't have them in your purse where you're all of a sudden in a dark parking lot and you're like, where are my keys, where are my keys? And you're standing out here. Especially as a dad, don't be that guy. So have the keys on you, in your hand if you need them, ready to go, so that when you get to the vehicle, you're ready to just unlock the door, get in and do it. Another thing we see a lot of times, people, they're still 100 feet from their car and they're trying to do the right thing by being prepared. Yeah, so what do? They're like, all right, it's gonna be open when I get there. So they hit it, and all of a sudden, you're 100 feet away, and now the bad guy, potential bad guy, knows where you're heading. So I don't like that. I want it to be opened as soon as you get there or when you get close, but I don't like when people, you know, unlock it from across the parking lot, because I'm like, oh, that's your car. Okay, here we go. Yeah. That kind of thing. That's what the bad guy's thinking. So don't do that kind of stuff.
With the really small children, it's going to be different for everybody. But if you have, you know, a toddler and mom's carrying one, at least dad is aware of what's going on as mom gets, or vice versa, gets the children in the car. One of the parents is situationally
paying attention. Yeah, not having two parents that both have their heads halfway in the car,
right,
back
all
to the
consumed
world.
with the kids, and you know, as much as practical for that. So.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge right now with me and my family. Is there's, you know, it's me and the wife, and then 3 littles, 2 that are like, they walk around with us, and the other one pretty much has to be held or carted around in a stroller. But it's like we get to the vehicle and it's this whole production trying to get everybody into the car and strapped in. And so like what we've been doing is I park a little bit further away so that I'm not around a bunch of other vehicles, and then we get them, we just put them in real quick, and then we get in, close the doors, lock them, and then we turn around and get them like,
and that's I think that's a good strategy. And that goes to the point of like everyone's situation is different.
Yeah.
Like I have to be careful not to look at it, all of this through the lens of having older boys who can help and who are self-sufficient. Like absolutely. I mean, you may have kids that you have to deal with. If you've got multiple kids or you've got a kid that you got to get strapped in, like I suggest you can do it that way. It's a great way to do it. Or you could also do it where one person deals with the children, gets in the car, and the other is literally outside pulling security. Yeah. For lack of a better term. Is just outside, kind of like this, looking around and just paying attention. Doesn't need to be awkward. No one needs to know what you're doing, but you're just paying attention to what's going on. So you're covering mom's back, or she's covering yours while you're taking care of the children. One of the things we don't want to do when we're bringing the family back out to the car is just waste time. So we immediately walk up to the car. Mom and dad typically stay outside of the car. In this scenario, our kids are older, so they can get themselves into the car. There's different, as we spoke earlier, like different things to consider if you've got kids that have to be put into car seats. But everyone knows where their seat is. They know which door they use. They immediately go to their door. Before we've gotten to the car, I've made sure as the lead guy that I've unlocked the car so that they don't have to struggle with the door locks. So they get in. I make sure that my children are in. I make sure that my wife is in the process of at least getting into the car. And then I get in the car myself. So my kids, because we've done this before, my wife as well, they know as soon as you get in the car, you put on your seatbelt, make sure your window's up if it wasn't, should have been, and then make sure that you're good to go, that you're ready to leave, that dad's not waiting on you so that we can leave as quickly, as efficiently as possible. I get in, don't waste any time, buckle up. I'm gonna immediately start the vehicle, put it in drive. That way, if there's some sort of threat that comes up during this transition time, I can immediately leave because I parked facing out. I can quickly leave and we can get out of town and we can get back home as quickly and as safely as possible.
Okay, so I know a lot of this may seem like common sense to some of us, but common sense isn't that common anymore. And a lot of people, once again, kind of find themselves between being completely oblivious to everything around them or being so hyper paranoid about threats that they can't be present in the moment, and honestly ineffective at actually protecting your family. So you've watched this video, you've consumed this information, you have some tips and tricks. We've already talked about this a lot, teaching your family these things organically, not like a sit-down class, but just as you go about your daily lives. What other resources can we look at or like turn to get better at this stuff?
A couple. So I like books, I like reading, especially from people who have been there and done that. So the first one I recommend is Verbal Judo. that one is really good. It teaches people, it doesn't matter if you do this for a living or not. In fact, it's really geared just towards the dirty civilian in the everyday world. It teaches you how to talk to people, how to negotiate with people, and how to de-escalate. De-escalation is a huge part of this that we didn't get totally in depth in because that's a whole class in itself, but being able to de-escalate situations and knowing how to talk to people and get things you want is a huge one. Another one is a book called Public Figures, Private Lives. Now that one's geared more towards the EP specialist, but it has a lot of good takeaways, a lot of which we use today for, you know, the everyday person to use in their life. So those two books. Something else that I like to use too a lot of times is, especially when I'm doing my advance, both for my family and for work, is just crime mapping and crime statistics. There's a whole lot of places. I mean, there's several dozen places you can Google and go look at crime statistics for the area you're in or the area you're going to. The DOJ has a website that has that. The FBI, of course, has a huge website that does that. The TBI for us, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, but pretty much any state's TBI equivalent, state FBI equivalent is going to have that. Now be aware, if you're on the federal or the state sites, there's going to be a lot more information to look at, but it's also going to be harder to digest. So just be aware of that. But there's other places out there like crime mapping. I think it's crimemapping.org or crimemapping.com. There's several of these places that'll go out there for you, and they grab those statistics and I don't say they dumb them down, but they make them much easier to consume. And then I really like the crime mapping website because it actually gives you a visual on your map for your town, for your county, for the state, wherever you're at.
Like a heat map?
Yeah, they do heat maps, and they'll have like cool little icons like on Onyx, like it's like, oh, there's burglaries here, here, and here, there's assaults here. And so it really gives you a good visual, like, well, I'm fixing to drive into that part of town. Let's zoom in on that.
I'd say avail yourself too of the things that are offered for free in your community. I know the local police department and here in Franklin, Tennessee offers a 9-hour free class for women and girls in self-defense. And if you're 14 and up and you live or work in Williamson County, which is where we are, you can go and take this self-defense class for free. Probably a lot of rec centers offer classes like that. CPR, go to your local community center and be certified in CPR, practical steps like that.
Yep, that makes sense.
Well guys, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've learned some stuff and hopefully everybody else has as well. So again, Centurion Defense Solutions.
That's it.
Yep, and hit them up for all of your security needs. They'll do all this for you. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, we will. It's gonna cost you a little bit. No, we'll do that. And we're not just here in Tennessee or Williamson County. I mean, we literally travel the US and the world, so we can go anywhere and provide that security for you, your family. It doesn't matter if you're a VIP, a high net worth individual, whatever, is like, that's part of our solution with Centurion Defense, is we want to make it as accessible to everyone as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Also, big thanks to Mill Creek Brewery for letting us use this place. If you guys are in the Nashville area, what town are we in right now?
Nolensville.
Yeah, Nolensville.
It's a great spot.
Yeah, it is. And now you know all the exits and all that stuff.
And where we hang out.
Yeah. The modern man tends to fall into one of two categories. Either he's the modern man, the modern man, when he's out with his family, like at a restaurant or something, I'm sorry, Nick, I'm really sorry.